the trial's been really crazy so far, but the trial has me thinking about something else kind of funny. I don't know if you knew. Maybe you can take a guess. Do you know who the first person or one of the main picks to play the Terminator was?
Oh my gosh. Remind me what year that came out in?
Ooh, 89, I want to
The
say.
late 80s. Who was big in the late 80s? And who was like an action star?
84, sorry.
Okay. Part of me wants to say like Sylvester Stallone. Part of me wants to say, but the 80s, it couldn't have been. Can you give me a hint?
Well, the fact that there's a big Hollywood trial going on kind of has something to do with it. And no, it's not Johnny Depp
Yeah.
or Amber Heard.
Okay, good to
I
know.
don't think she
Is
was
it,
alive at the time that happened.
in do you know the Chronicles of Riddick movie?
Vaguely, yeah.
Who plays like that elemental person?
I don't know it well enough to know what you're talking about.
I think it's Judi Dench. Is it?
You're absolutely right. No, do you want me to tell you who it was?
Yeah, I have no clue.
So one of the original picks to play the Terminator was O.J. Simpson.
Wow.
But James Cameron didn't want him to play the character because he thought he was too pleasant to portray a dark character like the Terminator.
Sorry. What is James Cameron the only facts that we get on this
I
podcast?
just realized it's another James Cameron fact. I swear I won't bring any more up in the future
Yeah,
until it's been
James
further
Cameron,
enough
you're
along.
actually banned from the podcast now.
Well, no.
Poseidon was a better boat movie, James.
Hey, if Adrian gives a performance award to a boat, that's a seal of approval right there. That being said, welcome back to the Drive Back Podcast, the movie podcast where we imitate our favorite thing to do after a movie, which of course is to talk about it on the drive home. I'm Garrett,
Hey, I'm Adrian.
and today we've got another Rewatchables episode, which is what, Adrian?
Rewatchable is where both of us have seen this film at least once before in our lives, and we rewatch it through a modern day lens, and we let you know if it's worth it or not. Some movies hold up real well, others do not. So you'll find out which one this is.
Absolutely. And today we're going to be doing a movie that I saw this back in 2009 when it came out. Actually, it released on my birthday, and I remember I went with my friends in high school to the IMAX like midnight release. It was awesome. But
Yeah, I think we talked about it too. I went with my parents to the midnight showing.
wait,
So
you did?
yeah, absolutely. And I was in seventh grade. So
That must have been
we,
a lot of
or
fun.
maybe eighth grade. But so at different times we had never met, but we were watching the exact same. That was when midnight showings were real midnight showings
Yeah.
as well. That was like there wasn't an early showing. But so we were watching the same graphic scenes at the same time somewhere on the planet.
Oh yeah. You were doing it with your parents, so I feel sorry for you. But today we're going to be taking a look at Zack Snyder's adaptation of the groundbreaking graphic novel Watchmen. Released in 2009, Watchmen was directed by Zack Snyder and stars Jackie Earle Haley, Billy Crudup, and Patrick Wilson. In an alternate 1985 where former superheroes exist, the murder of a colleague sends active vigilante Rorschach into his sprawling investigation, uncovering something that could completely change the course of history as we know it. Before we dive into spoilers, because I would say there are some pretty major spoilers in this movie. So if you haven't seen the film, let me actually double check where it's streaming real quick, because it used to be on Netflix.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's there anymore. It's on Hulu right now. So if you have Hulu, it is available to stream there. If not, you can rent it pretty much anywhere else. But some spoiler-free thoughts, Adrian. I mean, now that we're both rewatching this again, what did you think upon rewatching it?
Yeah, I think when I was younger, I think I thought it was really good. I had not read the Watchmen comics. I since have. And I think that watching it now, I definitely feel like I noticed a lot more that was pretty not good with this movie. On this rewatch. I've seen it multiple times, but I feel like this time maybe I was just again through a critical lens. But I feel like I noticed a lot more stuff that I was just like, that's kind of annoying or that's kind of weird. So, that's how I felt about it.
Sure. I remember seeing this, like I said, when I was in high school, and I loved it then. I hadn't read the comic. I just saw the trailer, and I thought it looked awesome. And a friend of mine was a huge fan of the comic, so he actually got me the comic for my birthday.
Nice.
And so I read it right after we saw the movie, and it made me enjoy the film more. And so it's been over 10 years now, because the movie came out in 2009. And I still really like this movie. I actually will go on a limb. I'm going to say it's Zack Snyder's best film. That's me personally. I know I'm controversial when it comes to Zack Snyder, apparently, but I just think this movie is gorgeous. I think that it is probably the closest representation to one of Alan Moore's stories ever.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely a comic book movie. Like it is shot like a comic book. I mean, there's shots that are shot for shot.
Yeah, they're straight from the pages of the graphic novel.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the best choices in picking Zack Snyder. But anything else I really have to say is going to be a spoiler, so we'll drop a spoiler warning. So if you haven't watched Watchmen, it is available to stream on Hulu. Now let's go ahead and dive into some thoughts. Now I want to start with you because I had covered this movie a couple months back on my blog. I had just watched it in my free time and re-rated it, which I have the same score that I gave it then. So when you said that you watched this movie through the more critical lens that we've both kind of acquired, you said you found some stuff that was kind of annoying or wasn't as good. Would you care to expand on that?
Sure, yeah, I think that it just mainly comes from the double-edged sword of that this is a comic book movie to a T. And I think while that's very cool and visually sometimes it's pretty neat, I think it's a different medium, right? And I think storytelling doesn't necessarily translate the same. The way that you can read a graphic novel or a graphic story like that comes across differently than it does when you watch a movie. And I just think that the movie on this watch through of Watchmen felt a little more just, yeah, like so comic booky, but it doesn't have the same, I guess, to me, charm or skillful execution that like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse did, where like they kind of made a comic book feel and they had the text on the screen and all that stuff. This movie takes a very serious role, and I think there's a disconnect for me on this watch through of, yeah, comic book shots and that feeling, but it almost seems way slower paced because, right, when you're reading like those shot for shot things, those scenes take in regular comics, they take a whole book to get through like 10 minutes of this movie. So it just seems a little slower. And some of that I found really tedious, and some of the just the stuff that like is comic book references kind of seems a little bit gimmicky this time.
I agree. I think the film does get a tad self indulgent, particularly in its styling and its music choices. Those are obviously Snyder staples. But I do feel like they fit here because the graphic novel does have like accompanying songs that it does reference and you can listen to. But it's weird because like I have to disagree on the slow part. Like I'm a bigger fan of slow burn stuff as opposed. I mean, I like the fast stuff too. I mean, give like, Venom, Let There Be Carnage. Cool. It was like a quick hour and 20 minutes, hour and a half. Like we got it done pretty quick. But this one, I feel like this was a bigger, more grandiose story that's more layered and more detailed, and it does need to slow down. And so I think I appreciate that a little bit more. And honestly, I think that this movie would have done better if released more recently because of things like The Boys or Invincible, where we get these darker, more adult looks at superhero films.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think the show was really successful as well, right? It kind of did get a re-release in a sense.
Yeah, I haven't seen the show, but I've heard very good things.
Yeah, same. I haven't seen it, but I've heard really good things. But like I'll talk about one scene in particular that I kind of found kind of a little gimmicky, where Rorschach shoots up his grappling hook, and there's like police tape, like 6 or 3 strands crossing in an X over a broken window, and his grappling hook perfectly hits the middle, and they all snap apart like perfectly. And again, if you're reading a comic book, that means a lot because it's visually telling you that he is cutting into a crime scene. Like,
Yeah.
he is now breaking the tape. In the movie, it just seems like a really wildly pinpoint accurate shot. And I just feel
Yeah.
like stuff, and that's a super small example. Again, like, that is so, like, watching it again, probably for, like, the 10th time,
It's
that
yeah.
I'm just like, okay, like, I don't know if I need that. And it just, so that kind of stuff is littered throughout the movie. It's just, like, super convenient stuff that on paper, was used to convey something. Whereas when you're watching a movie, you don't need to convey those same things. So it does seem a little tedious and, like you said, self-indulgent at times.
Yeah, but it's almost a hard comparison to make because I had just recently rewatched another one of Zack Snyder's movies, Sucker Punch, which I feel is completely style over substance.
Yeah.
Whereas this one, I hesitate to say anything that it's style over substance. I say that it's self indulgent because it definitely relishes in itself a little bit more than other films would. And it almost has like that air of self importance. Like, I know that this is an important graphic novel, so we're going to try and make it an important movie. But there's so much substance there that I feel like, when you're expecting something deeper like that, especially now with things like The Boys or Invincible or even The Watchmen show, those little style moments stick out. And maybe that's what it is. We're starting to get more, you know, other well-written adult superhero things, that moments, those little cheesy moments like that stand out, or like the little bit
Sure.
of that floaty Hong Kong style fighting every once in a while you hear or you see in the film, that can kind of stick out a little bit too. But it's a stylistic choice, and
Totally, and that's
for me
all.
it
That's
works.
what Snyder's known for. Yeah, and it'll work for some people, and it won't for others. Like for me, it worked 9 out of 10 times. It's just on this watch through, I definitely started to notice all those things. And I think another thing that I is a little bit like, yeah, I'm all for slow burns as well, like you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
I just think this movie is too long for what it tells you,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it should have been like cut by a half an hour, and a second film should have been added.
Mm-hmm.
I think they tried to pack too much story. Like there's a lot of like unnecessary loose ends, I feel, at the end of just like little tidbits of story from in the graphic novel. You get a ton of closure and all that stuff. And I feel like in this one at the end they just start like shooing in resolutions to these things. And it just feels like it was, I don't know, it's like a middle ground of, if it's one movie, it's too long and too slow. If it were two movies, you could fit more in and keep it fast paced. Like it's a weird middle ground.
It's almost like I feel like it could have been a 4 hour movie, like Lawrence of Arabia or close to that, and have an intermission in the middle and tell the more complete story.
Or like the Snyder cut of Justice League. Like
Yeah,
break it out into parts, do whatever you got to do. But yeah, it
but
just
this was
feels a
also
little
2009, so it was a little harder to do that.
totally. It
Um,
just feels a little lost. Like it was almost there, and it just kind of found its way into this gray area.
yeah, exactly. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about one of the most controversial parts of the movie, especially for people who have read the comic book, and that is the ending. Which in the graphic novel, spoiler alert for the graphic novel, ends with Ozymandias releasing a giant squid alien creature onto various different cities. Yeah, and in the movie, they're like nuclear type explosions created with Dr. Manhattan's energy. Both are designed to make the world think that Dr. Manhattan's had enough of us and finally peaced out. Now, when you look, because you've read the graphic novel, you said, and you've
Yeah.
seen the movie, do you think that the change is justified? Do you think that perhaps it made more sense for audiences, or would you rather have seen the giant squid? Like, what do you think?
I think I rather would have seen the giant squid, but I understand that at the time CGI would not have done that justice, right? The movie is definitely a lot of practical CGI. And I think it's all of those things. I think it definitely makes more sense for the fans, or like just for a more linear story, right? It's a different medium, so it's a little easier to follow this through plot of Doctor Manhattan being kind of framed and like all that stuff. So it just makes a little more sense from an audience perspective, especially if you hadn't read the graphic novels. And again, I hadn't when I first saw it, so I thought that's fine. I was like, cool, that's the whole story. I don't know. I think it would have. Again, I feel like if it were longer and they really kind of built up to all that, like it just would have made a lot better of an arc if you could have the building blocks to do it. But I don't really remember I don't really remember what the squids or like what they looked like on the paper. I'd have to open the book back up.
Yeah, it was definitely like very big, like bigger than skyscrapers type of a thing. It was like a kaiju type thing, and
Can't remember. Like I'll just have to look again because I can't remember. I'm trying to picture how they would look on screen. I'm literally picturing like a giant squid from like the 1970s Godzilla movie.
from what I remember in my head, it looked like, for lack of a better term, like a giant like stalk of broccoli with tentacles that came off of it, like that shape, almost like a cupcake
Interesting. Okay,
broccoli
yeah,
type shape.
that does not ring any bells. But yeah, I do
Um,
remember.
I'll
I
put it in
remember
the
the ending
episode if I can
definitely.
find a picture. I'll put it in right here, and you can kind
Okay.
of see what we're talking about, for the YouTube
Wow.
video.
What? That's what they look like. Very cool. For
um,
all of you listeners at home, visualize.
I'm going to take the opposite. I actually prefer the film's ending, and or the the
Interesting.
act of Manhattan kind of framing, because I think when you're looking at it in the scope of the Cold War, which is when this takes place, the height of the Red Scare and nuclear annihilation, having nuclear like explosions resonates more, I think, like visually and just thematically, than just having a giant squid come in like a 50s B movie. I never liked that ending in the book. I remember for years like that kind of came out of nowhere. Maybe I'll have to reread the graphic novel to see if it's really set up for any particular reason. But the explosions just felt better because everyone's seen Dr. Manhattan in the world at that point. They know what his power kind of looks like. So it's easy to tell that those explosions were not nuclear missiles, that, we were being punished kind of a thing. So
Yeah.
I definitely preferred the explosions over the squid, 100%.
I think I might be falling victim to the whole like the new Suicide Squad movie with the giant starfish. Like I just think it can be done well now.
Yeah,
Like that just the visuals and the destruction and like with Unreal 5 we're at a level where they could really do some cool stuff with it instead of visually just showing like another explosion in film.
yeah,
Again, yeah, it looks a little different. It looks like his blue energy and stuff, but it's like I just feel like it could have been a better to me a better wrap up or like a more exciting wrap up instead of just like here's what's happening. It would have been a little crazier.
sure. I can kind of see it both ways from like a book purist standpoint, but also just from the film standpoint. If you want to
Yeah.
know something interesting, though, I don't. This isn't like an official trivia piece for the movie, but it just reminds me of it every single time. When the explosion goes off in New York, and there's like the hot dog cart guy, and there's like the comic book nerd, and they kind of like grasp each other as the explosion goes off, and they get lifted up, and they, as their bodies get disintegrated, it's the same shape of the stain that's on comedian's button, or it's like a similar shape.
Interesting.
I don't know if that's intentional, but it reminds me of it every single time.
Okay.
So just a quick little fun fact there. I do want to talk about one of the biggest positives for this movie, though, and I want to see if you agree. Or positives, in my opinion, and that is the casting.
Yeah.
The cast
Great.
is perfect in this
Yeah.
movie. Jackie Earl Haley is awesome as Rorschach. You have Patrick Wilson as Night Owl 2. He's great as well. Malin Ackerman, with probably the best performance I've ever seen her give, which unfortunately isn't saying much. She hasn't been given a lot of work. Carla Gugino is awesome in everything she's in, except when she's being porked by Robert De Niro for no reason
Yeah.
in Righteous Kill.
Yeah.
Go back and watch that episode if you have no idea what we're talking about. Pretty much everyone is firing on all cylinders. Billy Crudup doesn't get enough work. The actor that portrayed Dr. Manhattan, he's definitely fantastic. Ozymandias' actor Matthew Good, also incredible. Everyone all around in this movie is really pulling their A game.
Yeah, I definitely think they nailed it on a lot of that. I actually don't. I don't think the acting was ever at fault. I think it was for me just again the adaptation is where it got a little
Mm-hmm.
lost for me on this one.
A little too heavy on, or maybe would you say it's too sticking too close to the source material?
Either or, it's a middle zone. That's kind of
Yeah.
my problem with it. Is I feel like Zack Snyder took just enough liberties to make it stand on its own, but not enough to make it run,
Mm.
and not enough to be like, "Ooh, I'm a book purist." Like it's the pages on like I just feel like it was a weird middle area on this watch through. Again, maybe if I watch it again in like 2 years, I'll be like, oh, this is great. But on this one, it definitely was like this. It just got lost for me. Not again. This happens all the time. I'm not saying it's a bad movie by any means. It's just like it. These are like nitpicks about what I think would have what's changed for me on this rewatch of the movie. Like what is
Hmm.
different, and that's what I feel like is different.
Sure. Yeah. Um, but that's pretty much all I've got in terms of notes. I think, um, I think whoever worked at Warner Brothers at the time, who obviously signed off on this and greenlit it and saw it and was like, you know what, that Snyder guy, he did a really good Watchmen. You know, we should make him do Superman, like the most dark and just like racy, risque comic book we could find. We're gonna make him do like the Boy Scout of DC next.
Well, and
Whoever made that decision is just like, oh gosh.
I think they probably tried to do that because of the way that he did treat Doctor Manhattan. Of course, it's a dark storyline, but like an all-powerful being,
Yeah.
and like how like I think they were like, oh, like he handled that pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe he can apply that to this movie, and then everyone was like, no, thanks.
Yeah. Exactly. It's just, yeah, it was an odd choice later on. That's no fault of Watchmen. I mean, that's that's just later on. But anything else you want to kind of bring up with Watchmen before we kind of give some thoughts and scores?
Oh, last thing is, I think it has the worst rendition of Hallelujah I've ever heard in my life.
Isn't it the same one he used in the trailer for the Snyder Cut?
Is that Hallelujah too?
I think it's the same version.
Great, now I hate that too. That was, it's just such a rough one. I feel like there's so many good covers. It's like one of the most covered songs in history, and they chose this like wildly, I don't know, like over, not even over the top, like subdued version that just has no energy to me.
I don't mind it. I think that's because I still think the Hallelujah from Shrek was worse.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll have to go back and listen to that. I don't really remember how different it is, but the fact that you said that means I have to go listen again.
Or yeah, or maybe we'll have to watch the Shrek series coming up,
Sure.
which we've been talking about for a while. So we get to do some memes. But anything else? Was that the last tidbit there?
Yeah.
Alrighty. So what are your final thoughts, Adrian? What's a score from you?
And I always go first. It's wild. Um,
Alphabetically, you're first.
yeah, I had it my whole school life. I don't need it now.
Fine, I'll go first. I'll go
Okay.
first then. So as far as final thoughts go, I said Watchmen does get a tad overindulgent, but wow, this movie is gorgeous. It's ripped directly from the pages of the graphic novel, and its casting is perfect. Already pretty much summed it up on my blog, which I can link below. But I did end up giving Watchmen an 88. I do think it is the strongest of Zack Snyder's films, and I do think personally it's one of the better, like straight comic book adaptations ever made. So,
Nice.
what
Yeah,
about
I
you?
think I think on this one, like I said, I think it just got lost a little bit. I think it doesn't know quite what it wants to be, and it's not its own fault. I think it came out at a time when film was growing in terms of people being more accepting of long movies and being accepting of different ideas. So I think it kind of fell into this just growing pains era. I think it definitely was a trailblazer for a lot of other comic book movies that we get today. So it's definitely to thank for that. But I do think for me in the 2022, it just gets a little lost and a little too gimmicky at times and takes a little bit too long to get there. So I gave this movie an 81. I still think it's if you want to give it a B, but I just think right now it's a little low for me.
Absolutely. I feel like, especially in today's world, today's political climate, today's entertainment climate, I think The Boys is probably more uh, like an apt kind of representation of this time in superhero,
Well, it's a
stuff.
modern day. It's basically a modern day Watchmen.
Yeah, it's much more about the the kind of entertainment, the politics side of it, as opposed to the Cold War. So definitely, I think
Yeah.
it's. I would almost say it's like almost a companion piece, like
Yeah.
an update, not updation. I don't know what that word means. Anyhow, before we dive into where you can find us and what's going to be coming up next in the podcast, I just found out probably a couple hours before the podcast, but unfortunately, we did just lose Ray Liotta, the actor. He did pass away in his sleep. Unfortunately, he was 65 years old. star of Goodfellas and several other films. For a lot of people, they know him from the B movie. Yes, it's a meme. We get it. But he was a very talented actor and apparently was one of the nicest people off screen. So, quick mention for him. Rest in peace. Just wanted to put that out there real quick. So, but Adrian, if anyone listening or watching doesn't know where to find us yet, I'm sure we may have some new viewers and new listeners from some of the YouTube content we put out. Where can they find us?
On YouTube, spoiler alert, you can find us at the Drive Back Podcast. We actually put ourselves up there on film, so if you want to watch us and be with us while we talk about it, you can find us there. Make sure to subscribe. Hit the like button, hit the bell. We post every Monday, but on YouTube specifically, we post exclusive content. We've done a couple tier lists. We did a trailer reaction, and we plan on doing some more stuff like that. So if you want to get the more like up-to-date news, that's going to be on there, whereas kind of the film journey will reside on any podcasting app that you have at the Drive Back Podcast, and on Apple Podcasts, if you give us a 5-star review, you'll get a shout out. So go ahead and make sure to do that, and then follow on whatever platform, Stitcher, Spotify, whatever you want to use. Again, those will be every Monday, very consistently. And then, that's pretty much everywhere. And then if you want to follow us, I'm working on some new Instagram content that can go up a little cleaner bit. Looking way less work on my end. Sorry, it was just those images were just real difficult every time. But so it's a little simpler now, so it should be all good to go. But you can chat with us there. We'll post about any new episodes we have or anything we got going on.
That's absolutely right. And next week we have 2 episodes. We have back-to-back, not the episode type, but we have back-to-back episodes that are going to be so much fun to talk about. We're going to be kind of doing a retrospective on the last 100 episodes of the podcast. On next week's episode, we're going to go through episodes 1 through 49 and go over a weird piece of trivia from each film we covered. And then the week after, we're going to do episodes 50 through 99. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We have a lot we're going to be talking about. They might be a little bit longer.
So excited.
But it's just, hopefully, it's some weird trivia. I've been researching them all. There's some weird ones. Can't wait to talk
people love trivia, though, and I feel like it'll be, if you want to listen to any of the episodes, I think that's going to be the one, because it's just going to be like fun fact after fun fact, laughing at it, being grossed out. Like, if you just want to know about random facts about films to tell your friends, that is going to be the episode to listen to.
Definitely a lot of fun facts, a lot of funny stuff as well, but also, like, there are some movies that genuinely just have good trivia. That is something that people don't really know about, so we did want to bring those up as well. Those are going to be going on over the next 2 weeks. So definitely look forward to that. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you all next time here on The Drive Back. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Drive Back. Make sure to be on the lookout for new episodes every Monday, and make sure to follow us on social media.